when you know that you have limited resources, especially now in the cutting of funding area, you need to partner with other organizations and coalitions to make sure that you can maximize your output. But from our experience, we've worked mostly a lot with special procedures. So with a lot of the UN experts who've done an incredible amount of work to document and really monitor the abuses that are happening in East Turkestan. And I think it depends on what you want, what your needs are. So for us, it was to highlight the different abuses. So we worked mainly with, for example, the Special Rapporteur on Minority issue because it kind of englobes a lot of different issues. We worked with Professor Obukata over the years. We worked with a Special Rapporteur on Torture or the working group or the committee. So for us, what has been the most useful is really independent experts, the treaty bodies, as well as some of the, I suppose, the more political spaces are the Human Rights Council sessions where we can intervene directly. So those are the ones that we've been mostly actively involved in. And for example, with the treaty body reviews, we've taken part in a lot of the different reviews over the years, whether it's the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in 2018 or the Committee on Social Cultural Rights that reviewed China in 2023, as well as the Committee on the Elimination of Violence, on the CEDA, Committee on Discrimination Against Women. So taking part in these reviews, what you do is you submit parallel reports. So you submit reports that these members of the committee can actually review the information you submit. It has to be, of course, factual. There needs, there are a couple of formats, but then you offer your side of the story, basically. So then, based on that, you can engage with them directly in the UN or outside the UN. And for example, you've also mentioned individual cases. We've brought up a lot of individual cases to some of the UN experts over the years, whether it's Ilham Tohti or some of Dr. Gülşen Abbas, Dolkun Isa's both brothers. So when you engage with them, they can be included in some of their communications sent directly to China, or during Human Rights Council updates, or during interactive dialogues with the independent experts as well.
And there's limited time left. Okay. Just one final question to you, Zumritai. When you give us an oral statement, for example, a lot of times it might be the case that you're interrupted by the Chinese governments, and so far, in many cases, member states of the European Union have intervened on your behalf and said, okay, let this person speak out. But just on this national level in Germany and also on the European level, what should be the advocacy efforts should be with targeting democratically elected governments and what they should do at the United Nations? If you could briefly speak about that.
You mean like the responsibility of Western states or
Yes.
democratic states? Well, I think their responsibility is to basically prevent the genocide, which actually they failed at. But right now, I think it's really important to bring this issue back to the table, because it's since the last draft resolution in 2022, since the OHCHR report, there's been no meaningful action at all, whether it's at the council or other bodies. So our goal as civil society organization is for the next year to bring this back, to have a debate with Western governments, and they should be leading this effort. It's not because the US has decided that they have other priorities that this issue should be, forgotten. We have European Union members, states, who have a responsibility. I mean, it's enshrined in a lot of these, their national constitutions. It cannot just become a slogan, the fight for democracy and human rights. It cannot be empty slogans. It has to be actual work. And we're here to do our part, and we need to be also receiving from the other end their help. So this can be done in various ways, whether it's from through joint statements at Human Rights Council sessions, through initiatives to present, for example, resolutions, to have a simple briefing about the findings of the OHCHR report, which we still haven't, had, to engage with community members, with individuals, and to push for really accountability at the UN, to set up a mechanism for investigation. You know, there has been over the years many different independent mechanisms set up on, for example, Iran or other places. So something like this, because right now the crisis is real, the genocide is ongoing, but still we don't see, none of us here have seen any real action from the United Nations, apart from, of course, the UN independent experts and treaty bodies. But now it's time for the political leaders of this world to take action, and we want to see tangible results.
Still a lot of work left to be done. Thank you very much. Tomitai Akin, Barbara Lochbihler, and Tomoyo Obakata. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanno.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third panel. Before we start our panel discussion, we're just going to play a video message from the Member of Parliament from UK, Baroness Helena Kennedy, please.
My name is Baroness Helena Kennedy. My name is Baroness Helena Kennedy, and I am a member of the British Parliament, the House of Lords, but I'm also the director of the International Bar Association's Institute of Human Rights. I've been a practicing lawyer for many, many decades, and I have supported the Uyghur cause now for quite a number of years. I've been shocked at the crimes against humanity which have been experienced by the Uyghur people at the hands of the Chinese government. And I think it's vital that the voices of those who have suffered and those who campaign on their behalf are heard, because these wrongs have to end. And we have to be calling upon China to really stop this abuse of the humanity of a whole people who live in Xinjiang province, who are forced into labor without being rewarded financially, who are enclosed in encampments which are really concentration camps, who've been subjected to torture and humiliation, to sterilization and forced abortion, who have had children taken from them, and who really have been subjected to the most hellish of crimes. And many jurisdictions have settled on the fact that what we're seeing is genocidal behavior towards the Uyghur people. So I'm calling upon everyone to stand in solidarity with you, as I do, as you have your Congress, and we have to have the world say loudly and clearly, this cannot continue.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. So for our third panel of the day, we will be exploring how governments and civil society are responsible for one of the most pressing issues for our time, which is Uyghur forced labor. From textile to electronics to solar panels, products linked to Uyghur forced labor continue to enter our markets. And this despite growing awareness and new legislation. So how effective are these laws, and where are the gaps? And in a time of shifting geopolitics and rising economic pressure, are governments at risk of trading away our values and human rights for short-term benefits? So today we are joined by 4 young panelists, and they are also, young leading voices in our Uyghur community. And they each will bring knowledge and experience from their respective country on this issue. So first, next to me, joining us from Switzerland, we have Rizwana Ilham, who is the director of the Youth Committee at the World Uyghur Congress and the president of the Swiss Uyghur Association. With academic credentials in economics and languages, Rizwana is advancing Uyghur cultural preservation and political recognition while leading initiatives that empower youth and support refugee integration through language and education. Next we have from the Netherlands, Ahmedjan Qasim, who is a Dutch Uyghur legal expert specialized in Dutch constitutional and administrative law. He is an activist and author whose book, The Uyghur Dream, has helped raise awareness about the Uyghur struggle and diaspora experience based on his own stories and the stories of his family. And from the United States, we have Sabrina Soleil, who works at Campaign for Uyghurs. She's the Director of Advocacy and Communications. Inspired by her organization's mission and the leadership of Mrs. Rushan Abbas, she now leads strategic communications, legislative advocacy, and global outreach to raise awareness on the Uyghur genocide. And last but not least, representing Germany, we have Mr. Khayr Qurban, who is the director of the World Uyghur Congress Berlin office, and he also serves as our treasurer. He is a longtime Uyghur rights advocate who has led our organization's UN campaigns, youth programs, and advocacy across German-speaking countries. And just last year, he was also named one of the top 100 key players on the China scene from the Table Media's top. So welcome again to all four of you. And just to ground our conversation, we will start, with the basics, the legal tools that are used to combat forced labor, particularly Uyghur forced labor. And I just want each of you to explain very briefly for our audience, what are the existing legislation that are in your country that address forced labor, especially Uyghur forced labor. Maybe you can start with Sabrina. Do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Okay, you can hear me. Okay, great. So in the United States, we have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Thank you. All right, so in the United States, we have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which passed in December of 2021. And it went into effect about 6 months later. And so basically, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is not only the strongest Uyghur forced labor legislation that exists, but also the strongest piece of legislation that addresses forced labor globally. And this is because it establishes a rebuttal presumption, which basically means that any goods in whole or in part that come or are made in the Uyghur region are presumed to be tainted with Uyghur forced labor. And it is on the companies who are tagged that they need to then provide evidence that their goods are not tainted with Uyghur forced labor. So currently, since it has passed, we have been focusing on implementation of that piece of legislation.
Great, amazing, thank you very much. And I was talking with Ahmadjan a little earlier, and he was explaining to me how EU works a little bit differently. So maybe you can explain, I guess, kind of the contrast between the US and the EU, and maybe also Netherlands, if they have anything specific in Netherlands.
Yeah, sure. There's a Dutch saying says that if it is at the end of the world, you should come to the Netherlands because everything happened 50 years later. That will take so much time to implement regulation or law regarding to forced labor, especially about Uyghurs. And besides, we have, like you said, the European regulation. The European Union have different competence, and the labor law is a shared competence, which means that the European Union from the Brussels will lay out the norms, and the national governments and law enforcement will implement the laws. And one of the most, I think, well-known one was the European Green Deal, and because of the Green Deal, there were different directives regarding to forced labor, not specifically about Uyghurs, but in general, which is called Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And because it is a directive, not a regulation, it doesn't have direct effect, so you have to implement them to the national law. And Dutch government will have 2 years to implement them, and it was adopted at June 2024, so they will have till June 2026 to implement this law. And this law is kind of different with United States one, because the United States, the regulation, you have the reverse burden of proof. So you have to, as company, prove that these products from the Uyghur region that's not made by forced labor, but the responsibility at the European level is put on the company itself. So company have to report by themselves to get a report about whether their products are made from Uyghur forced labor or not. That's some of the leading experts have some critics from, but we will get back to that later.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of what we have in Canada. We have Bill S211, where companies are essentially encouraged to report that there's no forced labor, but it's, this law is often criticized as being toothless because it's very voluntary, and I don't think there are really mechanisms to from our border patrol agencies to check if products are made with forced labor, and also, you know, if there was a company that did use products that were made with forced labor. I don't know if there is really a mechanism to really punish them. So, is there something?
The enforcement is done by national government. So if Hungary does not want to check the forced labor, so they cannot, because that's what the law states. And one more thing I have to add is that the law only apply to companies who have at least 1,000 employees and have 450 million of turnover. So the small and middle companies are not under that law. So that's also some of the critics from the legal experts. So that some of the small or middle businesses can be used as for the bigger company to import products from the Uyghur region, because they are not under the law.
I see. Thank you so much for that. And maybe turning to Brother Ghayur, if you can tell us, is there maybe something in Germany that, I know that as Ahmedjan explained, the EU kind of works together, but is there something specific to Germany that address forced labor and Uyghur forced labor?
Yes, certainly. You may correct me, but it was not always true that the speeds of dealing with bureaucracy in the Netherlands is especially slow. But at least it comes to the due diligence law. They have due diligence law prior to the German ones. So in Germany, we don't have specific Uyghur-related due diligence law. However, in 2023, January, we have supply chain and due diligence law in Germany came into effect after several years of fierce discussions between civil society organizations and the lawmakers and the government, because as you mostly aware, Germany is a founding member and also a key player in Europe. So their decision is absolutely affect other member countries and the overall direction of Europe. And considering also the fact that Germany's foreign trade volume in the entire European Union, this every change and moves from Germany will eventually affect the European legislation too, and that's why this thing the previous discussion is so fierce, because it is not only affecting Germany but also well beyond. And during the discussions, we were able to bring up the Uyghur forced labor into the discussion, and we have plenty of positive collaborations between civil society organizations, labor rights organizations, so that those concerns can be considered by the German law. However, this law was adopted with many reconciliations between various parties. I cannot say that it is not necessarily a toothless law. However, the German law has unique aspects, as my colleague from the Netherlands said. This is a law. The German law is also. I just lost my point. Sorry for that. The German due diligence law is targeting to educate companies. This is perhaps one of the major differences between the other parties. So it is on the first place to educate the companies to comply with the organization, with the concerns that we raise, and but at the same time, this is also sharing the same basic principles as in Netherlands, so that the proof is lasting on the civil society part, not on the company. This is perhaps what makes this law not as much aggressive, not as much effective as the specifically dedicated law in the United States, because it is not the German supply chain and due diligence law is not addressing specific issues like Uyghur forced labor. However, they generally generally addressing these issues, but their purpose at the end is not to punish companies. The punishing is the ultimo ratio. However, this takes huge steps. It takes prolonged bureaucratic steps so that those companies have enough time to make necessary measures, adopt necessary measures to change. This is what we have seen, for example, in the Volkswagen and also BASF issues. There have been cases opened in accordance with the law with the specific Uyghur forced labor concerns to the agency which we call in Germany in BAFA. And however, those processes has not yet been finalized, and there is still lack of information about the process of the law. However, thanks to the well collaboration between civil society organizations and also existence of this law, those big players like Volkswagen and BASF were forced to leave the Uyghur region, and yes, these are the main things that I would like to raise.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I can draw similarities with Canada, where I think we also take a similar approach where we're not so much about punishment, but more about educating companies and give them a chance to maybe move somewhere else and improve their practices. Next, for Rizwanada, I would like you to answer the same question, but I think I'll throw in my next question to you as well. So I think, having law in the books is one thing, but to really implement it is another story. So can you tell me a little bit about the legislation existing in Switzerland, and is it working? What are the gaps there?
Thank you. Hello. Okay. Well, in Switzerland, we have also Swiss due diligence law. Hear me? Yeah. Okay. It was also like in Netherlands. It took 2 years to get implemented. It was put in force since 2022-23, but it was implemented in 2020. So. Why it matters? It's our first binding national law tackling the forced labor. But the thing is, it's not nor the Uyghurs or forced labor or like is Turkestan is mentioned there. It's just all generally what's for the general value chains, global value chains. We have also like federal custom act bans like child labor. And made with forced child labor or like forced labor, but the thing is, customs only flags a handful of implements. Like if the NGOs or civil societies doesn't mention it or do something about it, there's nothing to report, nothing's going on. Switzerland, the problem with Switzerland is in Europe, but we don't belong to EU. That means we are the only one country next to Iceland who has free trade agreement, which makes the business with China very attractive for Swiss people. And that means for the profit, say the laws which exists in like due diligence and this for companies like Mr. Kurban said, they don't want damage to companies, right? So money is power. It doesn't matter. Like next, we can all see human rights. Yeah, we talk about human rights, people wars, but the money talks at the end. And I have to say, Switzerland is a third sector country, which is we don't have like our own gold or oil or this stuff. So we are very dependent on import and export and the third sector. So in Switzerland, they try to be attractive to China, even like after the human rights dialogues or other things, they don't criticize China. So they just put the laws because the civil society, Swiss Uyghur Association, World Uyghur Congress, and so we push them. So they just can pretend we are doing something, but it's nothing happening, and Yeah, but since 2019, there was a huge scandal because of the Swiss textile fabrics who imports straight from East Turkestan, Xinjiang. It was like explicitly like these companies. It was even in Zurich where I live. But after we made a lot of, what can I say? Now I just want to speak in German. I'm sorry, my English is gone. Campaigns, yeah. After the campaigns we made, these fabrics are closed, and also because of the U.S. laws for labor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back later on your point about activists and our effects, and again, I'm drawing similarities to Canada because I'm from Canada. Yes, you mentioned about companies not being really accountable for forced labor unless there is civil society action that is pushing them to be. And I think that reminds me of our Uyghur rights advocacy project based in Ottawa and our allies that have asked our Canadian ombudsperson for responsible enterprise to investigate some of these companies so that we could draw attention to them and kind of force them to change essentially. Sabrina, I think we understood that the U.S. is pretty ahead on this issue, but do you think there are still gaps between the legislation and the implementation of
Yes, absolutely, and this is what we've been working on the most right now is the implementation. I'll talk about a couple of gaps, and due to recent events, some things have been changing a little bit. But one gap or loophole that we've been seeing is that companies are doing what we call bifurcating their supply chains. So what they're doing is they're creating a separate supply chain that goes directly to the US, and they're still using Uyghur forced labor in their supply chains that go to other countries. This goes against what we aim to do, but it also it shows us that we need other countries in a coalition to implement similar legislation. Another loophole is that sometimes what China will do is even if the materials or the goods are coming from the Uyghur region, they're finalized and packaged in a third country and then sent to the US. But recently, the Customs and Border Patrol just released guidelines for doing isotopic testing. So basically actually testing the atoms and the material to see where the geographic origin is. And so that could address the third country loophole. And then we have the de minimis tax exemption, which is how Shein and Temu have been flooding the US markets with forced labor tainted goods. And recently, the current president just signed an executive order to close the de minimis tax exemption on China and Hong Kong specifically. And so this cuts off a major artery for these forced labor goods, but it's not law and it can be repealed in the future. And so we're still pushing for the de minimis exception to be closed globally. And yeah.
Yeah, you talked about, going through third countries to make it seem like it doesn't come from China and it's not made with forced labor. And that just reminds me of a little anecdote of, I just went, grocery shopping the other day, and I think I was looking for some, I think it was like spices, and then on the package, it was like in Korean, I believe. And just out of curiosity, I was reading the back, and it said that actually the spice comes from China, but it was just packaged in Korea, and the package was in Korean. And if I hadn't read, the bag, I wouldn't have known that. I would have assumed that it was Korean, right? So I think this is really a big problem, even though there are companies that try to eliminate forced labor from from tainting their supply chains. Because of loopholes like these, it's very difficult to do. Maybe we can go to Ahmedjan. I don't know if you had anything to add, or other panelists, on loopholes maybe, or gaps between legislation and implementation.
Like I mentioned before, the European directive is does only apply to companies who have at least 1,000 employees, so such big companies, and not to the smaller middle companies, and also there's no thing like European enforcement. It's like national enforcement. So in Netherlands it is AFM, so Autoriteit Consument en Markt, ACM, I'm sorry, and that's the agency who have the responsibility to enforce the law. And Netherlands is still considered as a democratic rule of a country, but some of the European countries are not anymore, such as Hungary. So in this kind of country, there will be some loopholes with the directives.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother Hayur.
Yes, perhaps I can also add a few points which we see a deficit in this whole matter. As my colleague said, this law is also applying in Germany for companies more than 1,000 employees. So in Germany, the majority of the companies in terms of numbers, and also their weight in terms of the foreign trade, they are all medium-sized companies. So you can effectively just keep those large number of medium-sized companies, which is less than 1,000, keep aside. This is one thing. And secondly, the so-called Beweisumkehr, I have to say that in Germany, how's it in English, which is we have to bring the proof. Yeah. So this is actually perhaps the daunting task for everyone who is dealing with this issue. So in times of where we cannot even call our mothers, sisters, brothers left in our homeland, how it is possible for us to get information out of this. And supply chain is a very complex issue, as we have seen in the many documentations documenting, showing the Uyghur forced labor, that it is a state-backed policy. So it is not a bunch of profit-hungry companies who is doing this thing. Rather, it is a well-founded state policy and a strategy to assimilate Uyghurs outside the Turkestan, and also using their labor. So those structures has been organized, as we have seen in many documentations, that has been organized in a very strict military style of labor and the control and monitoring. So it is simply not possible for even for the experienced due diligence companies to finding out the issues on that. And China has also aggressively taking measures like anti-espionage law, so that even to looking after the information about these fields being regarded as a national security issue. So which means it is especially difficult for civil society actors like us, and also people who directly suffered of that, in order to prove that. And this is perhaps the very tough deficiencies of this law, and this is one thing. And another deficiency is the law did not give equal treatment to the people being affected. So there is beratungsstelle, there is a advisory bodies directly organized by the German government, but also a private advisory organs, companies who help those companies, internationally active German companies, to educate them about the law consequences, but also how to dealing with this at all. So there is a advisory mechanism has been installed there. However, it is nothing for the people being affected like us. So we are absolutely, obviously, most of us are not legal experts. So we can at most can read and barely understand the law. Not talking about without mentioning that how to implement this. And in order to implementing this, you have to get lawyers. You have to use their work, and all of this is also containing with or binding with financial resources. So if you are not the financial resources, you cannot get the respected advice, and you cannot implement it at all. So as you wonderfully said, law is just written on the paper, and this is just almost useless if it is not being implemented. So the implementation side, there is a great lack. However, the CSDDD, which is another European supply chain and due diligence law, which will be come to effect in 2027 or in 2 years. And there is a great hope that, of course, the law has been implemented. The law has been passed in the European Parliament 2024, but the membership countries have time until 2027 to incorporate those regulations in their local laws. So, which is actually also playing with the time. Until that, those perpetrators of Uyghur forced labor has already refined their methodologies how to dealing with this, and this is brings us in a very outward situation for us.
Can I get 2 points?
I'm sorry?
Can I add two
Yes,
small
of
points?
course, of course.
Besides that the law is going into effect 2027, it is phased entry forces, so which means that first years 2027 the law only applies to the company who does have more than 5,000 employees. So you will wait for 2 years more, and it will apply to companies who have 2,500 employees, and then you will wait 2 years extra to have the smaller companies with 1,000 employees. Yeah, and one more point is that this law does give the civil society more tools to hold the state accountable, because in the Dutch civil law there is an article which stated that you can commit an unlawful act, and by this law there was a huge case in 2019 about climate, that the state had committed unlawful act regarding to climate change, and the civil society won the case, especially the Supreme Court stated that the civil society have won the case. So this law does give the civil society more tools to go to the judges when the state does not apply to the law.
And I think Sister Ruzana, you wanted to add something as well?
Yeah, exactly the next point. Like also in Switzerland from 2023, it was for companies like more than 250 people. So that's a bit less, I think, than other you guys. Also, the thing is like Swiss law reaches only to direct suppliers. That means the second tiers or third tiers, where Uyghur origin content comes on this stuff, inputs often unchecked, which is also a problem, like you mentioned, right? So in the different country. And also, like, there is no penalties for non-compliance. Like, there's minimal and seldom applied, so there's little deterrent effect. And Swiss Customs and SECO, this is the Außendepart. You have to tell me this. Foreign Affairs, Department for
Our
Foreign.
translator.
Yeah, exactly. So SECO, they have just two investigators investigators to conduct proactive and overseas inspections. So this would be like the different problem. And in contrast to Germany's Lieferkettengesetz or forthcoming EU directive, Switzerland has not issued cross-industry instructions for East Turkestan related risks. So that's a bit the difference.
I see. I think we understood that, law takes time and it's slow and often, most of the time, not perfect. I think Rizwanada and Ghiroka, you both kind of mentioned civil society action and action from NGOs. So I wanted to follow up on that. Maybe you can start with Brother Qayyum. Maybe you can touch on Volkswagen since you're based in Germany, where governments are very slow and where law is very slow. Even though civil society, there is a limit to our power, we still do have effect on these companies. So if you could talk a little bit more about, NGOs and campaigns and civil society, and how are we impacting and making change where the law is lacking?
Yes, certainly. Obviously, the case of Volkswagen is very symbolic and very important in order to raising awareness to the vital issue of Uyghur forced labor in the Germany's context. And as you're mostly aware, to being a symbol of in the industrial Germany, and Volkswagen has a great stake in China in terms of profits, in terms of business operations, and so on. And and also this unfortunate decision that the company has made a dozen years ago, which was obviously a political decision to complying with the Chinese request to establishing a factory in this troubled region. And after the media reports has been emerged that the Volkswagen get involved with indirectly in the Uyghur forced labor, where it creates huge waves in Germany's economic press. And we have to admit that the World Congress is not the only players who has been doing campaigns against Volkswagen and other international companies, because of the fact that the Volkswagen has a very awkward position in the Uyghur forced labor because of their factories, and also because of the very unfortunate communication of the companies inside, that they never heard about Uyghur genocide. They never the companies bosses statements, as you can remember, and this makes everything more complicated for the company. And of course, this comes to our advantage. And in Germany, we have heavily relying on civil society collaborations. So we have collaborated. I cannot enough time to name all these civil society actors, and without their tremendous support and solidarity with our concerns, it was for us not possible to bring this giant company and change their decision. So at the same time, or in parallel to our the numbers of civil society campaigns, we also proactively approaching to German lawmakers, not only on the federal level but also on the local level, because as you're mostly aware, the Niedersachsen, as being a German state, it has a great share in the company, and also head of the state is also residing in the company's supervisory body, and this also gives us a reason to approaching those decision makers and who has been trusted by the stockholders to monitor the activities of the company, to ask them to address the Uyghur forced labor. Unfortunately, the politics are also responding in a positive way to the issue. They are not like that. Oh, okay, we don't have time or we don't have interested. Rather, they are proactively listening to our cause, to listen to our concerns, and we believe that they have also directed this to them. So obviously, this is a very complex campaign, complex, but without the support of the many partners that we have, and that we are still very thankful, we cannot do this with our own power.
Absolutely. I think, consumers and civil society, NGOs play such an important role and, fill in the gaps where law is lacking. And I do want to follow up with Rizwana, because you did mention civil society and NGOs as well, but I want to tie in my next question because of, in the interest of time. Yes, if you could comment on, impact of the civil society, but also currently some governments are hinting at wanting to collaborate more with China due to to hedge against U.S. instability because of tariffs and some of the instability happening there. And there are companies and governments and maybe just individuals who want to work more with China because of that. If you could briefly comment on this point as well.
Well, was it? No, I'm like a bit over things about your questions.
Maybe
help me with this.
Yeah, we have seen that European governments and other Western governments have been more friendly with China because of the war in Ukraine, and because China could play mediation role to mediate the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There's also some of the experts in the Netherlands also have stated that the European Union could use the comprehensive agreement on investment, which was stalled in 2021 because of the sanctions, that they could use the investment to drag China into a mediation role in Ukraine-Russia war. So that's something that we have to keep in our mind. And the most important things I think that we have in our hand regards to circle of influence is when we have election, vote for the right party. Vote for the right party who does care about human rights, who does care about everything happening in the world, and that is the things that we have in our hand, and I think the most underestimated one, and sometimes overestimated one, but I think is the most important one.
Thank you.
yes, we have 2 minutes left, so briefly.
Yeah, I think I can get now back. I was nervous. So I think also the most important tool what we have to just conclude is awareness, public awareness, political campaigns, and also like we have to make the we have to open space for debates, that the people have the possibility to know, to go somewhere and to report about that. I think that's the most important part, because like she said before, like mentioned, like Temu and Shein is not only in US but also in Switzerland. It's everywhere. Like in Switzerland, like 90% of the stuff is imported from China, and we don't know if it's from Xinjiang or forced labor or other things. And I think the most important thing is just public awareness and reporting places. Then we can do the rest.
Thank you for that. And Sabrina, you're from the US. Maybe do you have any advice on people that want to turn to China to hedge against the instability of the terrorists?
Yeah, I'll merge just kind of my closing statement with that since we're at its end. But to date, $3.67 billion worth of goods have been stopped at customs. And there is a whole team of people in the United States. Every day they wake up and they're working on countering Uyghur forced labor. And so the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, they collaborate significantly with civil society. They care about Uyghur testimony, and it really informs the entity list in the United States. Automotive parts as well as solar are the most number, have the most number of track shipments into the US. And this is because there's so much research on it. When research came out about seafood entities were added to the entity list. So really just improving and expanding upon our documentation efforts, I think is a great asset. I know and I understand giving testimonies is a very difficult thing, and not all people decide to go this route. However, if you have experienced forced labor, or if you know somebody who has experienced forced labor, that testimony is extremely valuable in sparking research that could really hold certain companies accountable. And last, I think that an asset that has gone under the radar is that the International Labor Organization, the ILO, they updated their guidelines in 2024 to specifically include state-imposed forced labor. And this means that, you know, China cannot just say, oh, we're utilizing our sovereignty in coercing people to use it. It's written, and I think that countries should really leverage that in their advocacy as well.
Thank you so much. I would have loved to continue our conversation, but in the interest of time, and I know some of us are hungry, so we will conclude here. Thank you so much to our panelists for your insights and this conversation.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, everyone. Just bear with me for 2 minutes. 2 minutes vaqtыңларны алма. I have some housekeeping announcements. So please, lunch will be provided here, just like for the coffee break, so people can line up outside for the lunch break. We will resume the session at 2:45. So please come back for this. But for those who want to pray Jummah, we have a mosque downstairs, so please, you can pray there. For the afternoon session, so after lunch, we will be We'll come back here at 2:45. Sorry, 2:45 sharp we start. So please do not go anywhere else. Uyg'urchada biz hozir tushlik tamoq yeymiz. 1 soatlik vaqtimiz bor. Shunga soat 2dan 1 soatdan birozjiq 2dan 45 nimishada boshlab bo'lamiz. Vaqtinglarni ching tutib tamoqni yeb juma o'qiydiganlar bo'lsa, pastda jami bor, shu yerda o'qisanglar bo'ldi. Andan keyin 2dan 45 da yana nimishada ko'rishimiz. Rahmat. For the our international guests, a reminder that the afternoon sessions will be closed-door sessions in Uyghur language, and we will not be able to provide interpretation. So this is for your knowledge. So you may want to do a tour of Munich.
Sorry, Ekran aldidagi hurmatlik ko'rurmanlar, bugungi naq maydon programmamiz mishada oxirlashdi. Qolgan mehmonlar sizlar o'zingizlar faoliyatinglarni qilyapsanglar bo'ldi. Naq maydonniki ma'liqi sizlarga deyilganimiz, ko'rurmanlarga deyilgan gap. Hurmatli ko'rurmanlar, bugungi naq maydon programmamiz mishada oxirlashdi. Yana bir qitimliq naq maydon programmamiz bo'lsa, yepilish murosimida bo'ladi. Buningdan sirtidagi barliq programmalarning hammasi yepiq shaklda bo'ldi. Yepilish murosimi 25 may bu échilishdan burun biz sizlarni yana xabarlantiramiz. Diqqatinglar ekranimizda bo'lsin. Ko'rishkicha aman bo'linglar. Riyosatchi iftixordan hammanglar o'tliq salom. Naq maydon tugadi.
I will share with you guys.